Welcome to Health Tech Heroes, where we talk to innovators who are rewriting the DNA of healthcare. Today, we are welcoming Susan Branagan, Vice President of Clinical Experience and Enterprise Accounts at InvisAlert Solutions. With 25 years in healthcare across multiple specialties, Susie has developed a distinct trauma-informed leadership approach that has consistently yielded exceptional results. Susie's work in pediatric and adult mental health settings has shaped her commitment to creating psychological safe environments for both patients and staff. She is known for implementing just culture frameworks and maintaining top colleague engagement scores for 10 consecutive years. In her current role, Susie bridges clinical expertise with technology solutions, demonstrating that trauma-informed principles can transform healthcare delivery while supporting the well-being of frontline professionals. Welcome to Health Tech Heroes, Susie.
Thank you so much. Well said.
Right.
Thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you here. It's great that you're not only taking care of patients, you're also taking care of healthcare workers. So it's a great way of to improve the healthcare system overall. And thank you, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Your nursing career spans 25 years across multiple specialties. What initially drew you to healthcare?
Sure. So thank you again for welcoming me on here today. So yeah, I have always had a passion for caring for people. I started out even in high school when I was doing regular babysitting jobs. I said, I'm pretty good at like taking care of kids, babysitting. Why don't I try what was called candy striping back in the 90s. It's now called voluntary work in the hospital, like a volunteer. So that's kind of where I started. In Boston, where I'm from, I would work at my local hospital as a volunteer. And that would be doing anything from bringing like sandwiches to patients, holding a hand, transporting a patient from a room to the hallway or to a test. And it just kind of gave me an idea of, is this something that A, is coming naturally to me, and B, that I could see myself doing as a career and focusing on in college. And I really did feel that way. I don't really come from a family of healthcare workers other than my mother's sister, who has been a pediatric nurse practitioner for her entire career. So she used to bring home, materials from work like gauze and things that I could play like nurse with my family members and whatnot. And it just really stuck. So when it came to choosing a specialty and a major in college, that's what I chose. And, I went to a great college, and I currently have a great relationship with them now, talking about trauma-informed care and just culture, which makes me feel that I've come full circle, that my college is asking me to come back and speak to the students of the next generation and, individuals that are going into the nursing field and advice and things like that. So really just caring for people. I mean, I'm currently even a youth sports coach as well. I just really, my niche and whatnot is pediatrics, adolescents, and mental health care. I've cared for all types of patients, all ages, all cultures. I just feel like my passion is within children and adolescents. Yeah, that's kind of what got me into healthcare, is just a natural feeling of wanting to take care of people, and just feeling like when I was helping someone who was either hurt physically, emotionally, mentally, that I felt I had a natural way of making them feel better. So it only just felt natural to take that path.
Thank you very much, Susie. I don't think you can be a nurse without having that natural tendency. It's such hard work.
Yeah.
People are difficult to deal with. Now you're talking about sick people.
Yeah. Yeah, you get people at their worst, right? So you always have to remember that, people are coming in and they are feeling 10 out of 10 pain, or they are mentally at their worst. And you really have to keep that in mind when times are getting a little tough with them and they may be escalating a little. You have to remember at the core of that patient is someone who really doesn't want to be behaving that way. It's just kind of their reaction in the moment and how they're coping. What are their coping mechanisms? So it's really important to remember.
Thank you for doing such noble work. Throughout your career, you have consistently taken leadership roles in challenging environments. What motivated your transition from bedside nursing to executive leadership in healthcare
Yeah,
technology?
Great question. So, are you actually asking about like into nurse management first and then current role?
Yeah, the transition,
Yeah.
your journey, right? Hey, what is mainly your mindset? Because I think everything is driven by your tendency to help people, and how does this help people more? And what was your transition?
Yeah, so I won't bore you with the amount of bedside, where I worked and all that and whatnot, but I did spend a good amount of my career at the bedside as a bedside nurse right out of college. It was where I was a CNA, and it's really important too when you're in nursing school or any industry really, and not just healthcare, that you're kind of interning or doing an internship or actual job in the summers or the weekends or whenever you can, related to what you're eventually going to be doing, because it's great to be able to say, when you go for that first job, that you have experience in the field instead of coming out of nursing school and never having stepped foot in a hospital, right? Other than your clinicals and things like that. So it was really great to be a CNA at the hospital that I became a nurse at. So I got a job as a registered nurse there. And I love that environment to start out in. I just knew that I was meant for something a little different. So that's when I eventually moved into working at the ICU in Children's Hospital. And that was a phenomenal experience, worked there for a good amount of time. And that was probably where I understandably gained most of my personal trauma and PTSD from, as these patients are, as you most likely know, are some of the sickest in the world. It's, the number one hospital for children to come to for chronic illnesses and acute illnesses as well. And, nursing school and just a couple of years of experience at the bedside never sets you up for what you're going to deal with in an ICU environment for children. It can be devastating, heartbreaking. It's very rewarding. The relationships that you build with the patients who are there for a couple days or months. I mean, I had some kids that were there 2 days. I had some kids that were there 3 months and more. Some made it and some didn't. I just look back at that time and remember, what did I make a difference in? And a lot of that was the bedside conversations that I had with families who were grieving, and sitting there holding their child's hand while they were suffering. I felt like I really connected well with these families and kids and was able to help bring some peace during that time. But it does take a toll on you, and you have to be very cognizant of your own mental health and your own wellness. And I always, wanted to take care of kids, but I just felt like, this environment is really intense. I want to keep doing this, but what else can I try that is a little less devastating? So I did some more work at other children's hospitals in Boston, and that's where I did some charge nurse roles, leadership roles, team leader, and those were very rewarding as well. As I said, I'm a coach too, so I like to lead. I like to make people feel comfortable. I feel like I'm easy to get along with, and if I had a partner in my CNAs, worked really well together. Nurses should never consider the CNA someone who does their work for them. That has never been my motto as a bedside nurse or a manager. CNAs are underpaid, and they do a lot of the work, if not a majority of the bedside work, the hard, dirty work. So there has to be that teamwork there and that respect. So I think that doing that and having that natural camaraderie and teamwork gained me the respect from my peers of she can lead, but she also isn't boisterous about it, and she's not bossy, and she doesn't make us do all her work, all that stuff. You can't be a leader if that's going to be your motto. So that's where I kind of realized that I could do that. So I did have a great manager at one role that said, you should really go for management. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I can't manage people. So it did take some soul searching. And then I just kind of went for an assistant manager role first, which is a great step because it's kind of like an introduction to the world of management without having that full responsibility of, all 90, 100 staff that you have. And I did that for a couple years at a hospital in Massachusetts as the assistant manager, and then eventually was asked to be the head manager on that same unit. And that was great. I had a couple of mentors that I worked with. I was very lucky to have. Always great to have a mentor in the beginning of your management career that's done that type of thing for a long time and learning the ins and outs. You don't really get a lot of training in management. A lot of management is feet on the ground. This is your job now. Like, it's 24/7. You have a pager. You have to be available all the time. And you kind of have to advocate for your own training and your own, advancement. So I was the head manager on a 24-bed medical telemetry unit with a mixture of detox and psych. So you call it a med-surg unit, right? But we really didn't have any surgery ever. So I kind of morphed into a medical telemetry detox unit by the time I left, as well as a very unique situation of like 4 ICU beds. So I kind of got back into the ICU world, but this was an adult unit. So it was like 18 to 100. And I was there for a good 10 more years or so after that as the head manager. And that's where I gained a lot of my leadership skills. It's where I gained my Just Culture certification. Trauma-informed care was not really something at that time that anybody talked about. You may or may not know that trauma-informed care is very recent in terms of how it's coming to light, being talked about everywhere, being the expectation on units and whatnot. So I kind of managed my unit using my own internal trauma-informed. I had never been educated in it, but I felt that I naturally had a way of making sure that my staff and the patients were healthy and felt cared for and felt supported. And that's the name of the game. You can't run a unit and just expect your staff to come in and not appreciate them, not give accolades, only complain about what they're doing wrong, only micromanage and ask, did you get your charting done? Why are you late? Are you going to need overtime again? I mean, do you have to ask those questions sometimes when things become a repetitive behavior and whatnot? Sure, but if you lead just that way, you're not going to keep staff. You're going to have high turnover, and the patients aren't going to get the best care. If people don't want to come to work and because they're scared of their environment, they're scared of their boss, they're scared of getting in trouble, do you think they're going to go to the bedside and give their best to their patient? They're going to try because, of course, they care about the patient. But if they have all that in the back of their mind and they're scared, like, oh, I hope I don't mess up because I'm going to get written up, or I hope I'm not 1 minute late because of this, you're not going to get the best of a person. So making sure people feel comfortable coming into work, not dreading Monday mornings or whatever their next shift is, that's when you know you have a healthy environment. You don't want to go to bed at night not wanting to go to sleep because you don't want to go to work the next morning. So learned a lot during that time, but as much as I loved that role and I loved all my staff there, and I still am in contact with them to this day, I wanted to get back to my roots of pediatrics, and I had felt like I had had enough experience in management to now manage a child unit. So what I always had on a vision board at home, I literally wrote, because I believe in manifesting, open my own child psychiatry unit. And I had looked at that for 5-7 years being like, yeah, whatever, Susie, you'll never do that. That's, oh my gosh, right? But then an opportunity came up in the Boston area for me to, in fact, run a brand new 24-bed child psychiatry unit. We took ages 3 to 12, sometimes 13, depending on their developmental age or their size, things like that. Sometimes we would take children on the autism spectrum, depending on the severity of it, because we didn't want to mix certain behaviors that would not be beneficial to the patient. So that's kind of was my last bedside management leadership role. I did that for a couple years, and I kind of looked inside, and the average lifespan of a nurse manager is actually only anywhere from 5 to 7 years before burnout, and a lot of managers go 10, 20, 30 years doing that. I've seen people in the burnout stage and what it does to the way they run their unit and the way that their staff see, and I didn't want to become that person that was just disgruntled and tired and not taking care of myself because I was so exhausted. So I took a leap in getting away from the bedside, but maintaining my leadership skills and utilizing my clinical expertise, and took on the role as vice president at InvisAlert, where we promote and sell a product that I used on the child unit myself as a way to protect the children. It's a product that helps monitor children at high risk. So when we do 5 and 15-minute checks or one-to-ones and things like that, that's the core product. And that's what we used. So I had, one-on-one experience with the product. I used it. It worked well. It made me sleep. It helped me sleep at night, knowing my patients were actually truly being seen. The staff felt like it was a great, platform. So I felt like that really helped my current role, where when I, work with our enterprise clients and whatnot, I can give firsthand knowledge of how well it works and how much it really does, significantly increase patient safety, decrease falls, increases patient and family satisfaction. I have patients, moms and dads say, this is the first time I've ever been able to take a nap at home or sleep at night, because I know that when I dropped my son here, your staff can't fake checks. They can't say that they saw a patient, but they were actually in the nursing station just writing in the computer, yes, he's fine, I've checked on him. You have to be within proximity to see the patient. So that's, my current role now. But I continue to spread the word and do talks and work with companies on just culture and trauma-informed care, because that is truly the root in my passion. And yeah, did that answer your question?
It did, and I think it answered three or four of my following
Okay,
questions
all
as
right,
well.
well,
So we are good with it.
good.
Yeah, yeah. We are. It was a really thorough answer, and there's so many things that we can dig deeper into it. But I want to focus on just one little thing. There was probably one or two incidents that changed your trajectory of your thought process. For example, like this one incident that comes to my mind. You don't have to answer this because I understand that you've gone through some really traumatic experiences
No, I love
within your
sharing.
role.
It's
Okay,
a hard
perfect.
thing to do. That's why if I get a little glassy eyed, that's tearing up a little, because what I do talk about a lot in trauma informed care is that, when healthcare workers themselves have trauma, you're expecting them to then come to work every day and care for patients who may or may not have trauma, but being in the hospital itself is traumatic, regardless of what you're there for, right? So you're already starting with a kind of a baseline low level trauma, just even being admitted to the hospital, or it could be, a 12 out of 10 in terms of the trauma that patient's there for. But yeah, so the reason that I'm so passionate about this is because there was an incident that happened when I was at one of my roles working with children, where it was so traumatic for me that I said afterwards, and it took years for me to realize this. Like I kind of like let it go for a little bit and was like, that's nursing. I just have to suck it up. And that was still the culture, right? So it took many years for me to realize, like, what happened to me that night was not okay. And I did not get the support that I should have received. And my goal going forward after that happened to me was to make sure that when I was a leader on my unit, that I would never not follow up and support my staff the way that like I didn't get, right? So I had taken care of I was kind of I was a yes person, and in a lot of my talks I talk about, being a people pleaser and a yes person can be, great for certain things, but it can really kick you in the butt in the end, because I never said no to assignments. So if I was given an assignment that was too intense, like mentally, I never said no to it. I was like, oh, this is a challenge. I'm going to be really good at this. I can handle this. And I mostly could. I always could. I thrived on challenging situations and dealing with difficult, family dynamics and all that. I was really good at that. But when you do it over and over and over and over again, anybody would start to become affected by that. So I had a certain shift where my assignment was to take care of two twin boys that were born with SMA2, which the long name of that is spinal megalopathy 2. It's very hard to pronounce. It's basically a very devastating and sad disease where you're born completely perfect. Like your organs are working fine physically, brain is functioning fine, you're physically okay, your lungs are fine. And then slowly over like a 2-year period, all of those organs begin to slowly shut down. So your brain function starts to shut down. Then another day your liver function shuts down. Then another day your urinary system shuts down and you need a catheter, and you lose control of your bowels, all that stuff. And usually the life expectancy becomes about 2 to 3 years. It's a very, very sad thing, because parents, when they give birth to these children, they're giving birth to an absolutely perfect child. And so why would you give that up? It is detectable when you do the pre-pregnancy test. So, you could technically know before, but, these parents brought these twins to term, and they lived a good 2 years of very, very happy, healthy life, and then they started to shut down. I think what was so devastating for me was it was two kids at once. It wasn't just one child. It was two children that looked exactly the same. I'll never forget their face, their hair color, and they were brought in and put in separate rooms. And I thought it was better because I didn't want to be running between two rooms and the parents running between two rooms. So I took another hospital bed that was not being used, and I put two hospital beds together so that the boys could be in the same bed, almost like going from a twin to a queen. And made the bed like it was a queen bed, and that way the parents could stay in that room. And then I was able to do like their pumps and all their medications on one on the right side, one on the left. I am an OCD type of nurse, so I was right on top of all the meds I had to give them, making sure right doses, everything. And I took care of them for a good amount of weeks. At this point, I can't remember if it was weeks or months, but eventually it came time to let them go. And I think what gave me the most trauma was that they still looked perfectly beautiful and normal, everything about them. It's just everything was shutting down inside of them, and they were very uncomfortable and a lot of pain. So, I had to give some morphine for pain, and the morphine does eventually, over time, end up letting you have a peaceful death. But I remember the father having to push the syringe with me because I felt like I was killing them. Which I knew I wasn't, but it was a really powerful moment because the dad was basically saying, like, I agree with this. It's time to let them go. This is what we need to do. They're comfortable now. You're making them comfortable. You've given them phenomenal care. We wouldn't have wanted a different nurse. Was all meant to be. So they passed away peacefully, and then I had to carry them down to the morgue, and their father gave me his letterman's jacket from college and wrapped them in that. And then I got down to the morgue, and the guy that worked down there, he knocked one of their heads off of the refrigerator, and it just added to the trauma in the moment for me. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, can it get any worse right now? So that happened, and I came back upstairs, and I collected myself in a sim lab in the dark for about 15 minutes. I don't think anyone even knew where I was, other than that I had gone down to the morgue. And then I came back to the unit, and I was given my next assignment, which was also a very sad situation that I don't even need to get into. It just added to the trauma. It was just another very, very, very sick patient, and I was harvesting organs, and it was just traumatic. So I didn't get any real follow-up or of how you're doing, and do you need the next day off or anything like that. I just went home that night, and thankfully I lived at home at the time with my parents, and my mother was amazing. My father was amazing, and they, just kind of rubbed my back and got me through it because it was tragic. A couple days went by. At this point, I don't even remember, this was so many years ago, how many days it took me to kind of be like back to the grind. All I know is I worked back then, and I definitely didn't take time off. I didn't call out sick, so I must have been back at work after that and just kind of went back to the grind and took my assignments. And that was just one shift of my entire career. So that's just one example of one day in my life. And then, I was a bedside nurse for X amount of years. How much more trauma did I encounter, right? That is the one that sticks with me the most. Do I cry about it all the time? Absolutely not. There are months and even years that might go by that if someone didn't ask me, I could be fine and not talk about it. But the second it's brought up, it brings back that trauma, right? So I just knew when I managed these units that I never wanted my staff to ever feel like I did after that night. So that's where the trauma-informed care piece came in, and creating an environment where, I checked in with every single staff member after their shift, night shift, day shift, evening shift. How did your shift go? Is everything okay? Did anything happen that I need to know about? Are you okay? My main thing wasn't about, are you getting out on time? It was, are you okay to come back tomorrow? That type of thing. And usually it was, working on the med-surg unit, we didn't see a ton of tragic deaths or really terrible scenarios, but we did see a lot of very sad situations and physically fast-paced environment, nonstop. You don't have a second for a break. So making sure these staff felt supported was really important to me. And if that meant during their shift that they had a breakdown and were crying, that I had to take over their assignment for a few, and they could go take a break in a Zen room that I had created where it's like a chair with lavender drops and it's dark and you can listen to Zen music for a few minutes and take a break. That's what we did on our unit. We all took care of each other. And then I made sure that every unit that I ran after that, that it was always trauma informed. And that's where I wanted more education on that too. So I have a great friend, Judy, who's an educator that I worked with, who's a brilliant, brilliant trauma informed educator. And her and I were just really on the same page about how we wanted to care for patients. And I loved that because I loved every day coming to work with her. And we were always texting each other, like, are you at work? All right, I'm going to see you down on the unit. And we always had the same mindset of like, with these kids that I now managed in the psych unit, my number one thing is they're coming in completely traumatized. Staff are going to care for traumatized patients. Those staff themselves may be traumatized. So now you have a traumatized staff member coming in and caring for a traumatized patient. How do you maintain the mental stability to your best ability as a manager? So that was my ultimate goal on a daily basis. Did I have other things I had to do, payroll and schedules and all that stuff? Yes, but that was the boring part for me. You know, if I could give up anything in management, it would be doing payroll and schedules and things like that, because I wanted to be at the bedside with the kids, with the adult, whatever patient population, and with the staff. I loved getting my hands dirty, going in a room and helping, a turn, a reposition, sitting and doing a one-to-one so someone could go take a break outside and get fresh air, all those things. So rambling now, I guess, probably. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think I need a minute to digest
Okay.
everything that I heard. Do you want to get a drink of water before I ask the next
I'm
question?
okay. Yeah. Are you okay?
Yeah, yeah. I had like at certain points, I had like this goosebumps just envisioning everything that you went
Yeah,
through.
it's I tell that story because I have nothing. I feel like you have to tell your stories because I think people are scared to admit that they're traumatized. And if you're a nurse in the healthcare field for any more than 2 to 5 years at this point, and you have not had a single thing happen to you that has affected you greatly, then I want to know where you work because I haven't met a nurse that hasn't gone through something tragic, or a tech, anybody that steps foot in the hospital, security guards, secretaries, they all have patient face to faces, and it all affects us different ways. So I tell that story and I'm okay tearing up in front of people because it is what it is. And it helps me too. Gets it off for the day. I talked about it, moving on, that type of thing. So yeah.
Thank you. So there are two concepts here: trauma-informed leadership, and then there is just culture environments for leaders who are just starting their career as a leader. What would be your advice to them?
Sure. So I wish I had this when I started, but I did have a great mentor that happened to be doing a consultation at the hospital and just leadership in general. And she had had many, many, many years under her belt. So she taught me a lot of the ins and outs of management. Again, trauma-informed care at the time I started was not really a thing. No one talked about it. It wasn't, I don't even think, a term yet. So I really didn't get much of that. I would say if you're becoming a new leader, the number one thing that you need to make sure you focus on is the people you're going to manage first. Their well-being. Do you know their names? You don't have to know every personal detail about your staff. In fact, that's inappropriate. I mean, sometimes you learn too much and you're like, whoa, 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 I don't need to know that. But if you have that type of relationship with your staff, you should realize, like, actually, as long as you hold your boundaries, it's great that they want to talk to you about what's going on in their life because they trust you and they know you care. So always, like, asking your staff, how's your family? How's your day been? Do you need time off? How are your shifts been going for you? Is night shift okay? I might not have a day opening right now, but I can think about it in the future. Is it not working for your family right now? All those things you need to make sure people first. The patients obviously first too, like patients and the people are first, right? And patient safety is first too. So making sure your environment is safe and knowing and making sure you know what a safe environment should look like. So coming into leadership, you really shouldn't be running a unit if you don't know what in your environment is considered unsafe for a patient. And that could be anything from a very obvious item like a sharp to a pencil in a room with a patient who's been self-harming that you just wouldn't think of would be a problem, right? So knowing your environment, knowing what's safe, being up to date on all of your like Joint Commission requirements and that your unit is being run ethically and safe. And then also back to the people part, doing a lot of research and getting the education on what is trauma-informed care. How do you take care of a traumatized patient? How do you maintain a relationship and care for your staff who have trauma as well, secondary trauma? There's all different types of trauma. There's complex, there's acute, there's chronic. Whatever it is, you need to be trauma informed as a leader nowadays, period. Because everyone might say, you might see a job opening, right? Nurse manager, medical surgical. Oh, great. I don't have to deal with anybody with any psychiatric problems. Slash 2025, you are never going to be working anywhere where there isn't someone or multiple patients that have an underlying mental illness. Mental illness is now it's coming up. It's still not in the forefront. It should be at the forefront of healthcare, but most medical telemetry or surgical patients have something underlying. And you might have someone that comes in with, pain in their abdomen of unknown origin, but then they get admitted to the unit and their entire stay has nothing to do with the pain in their stomach. And all of a sudden you find out that they have borderline personality and they're throwing trays across the room and they're calling staff names, they're homophobic, they're all this. And you're like, where did this just come from, right? There's no education, there's no preparation for the staff around this. So, thankfully it was like an innate thing for me to I would go like that patient I just gave an example of. I was like the first person in that room to go deal with the thrown tray or whatever, because that was my jam. My staff used to call me the Mother Teresa of psychiatric patients because I would just go into any scenario and be like, I'll handle it. And they're like, Susie, you shouldn't go in there right now. It's really bad. And I'm like, I got it. And, sometimes I'd take a security guard in with me or whatnot. And maybe it was even to my detriment at times. I did suffer a concussion at one point during my career because I was with a patient who I trusted a little bit too much. She was 90 pounds soaking wet and 5 feet tall. And she managed to kick me while I was helping with a Foley catheter, but most likely an accident. But either way, she was a little combative and I ended up out of work for a couple of months because of it. So, you do have to be careful. And I kind of did put myself in harm's way a couple times, but I wouldn't change a thing because I am the leader of that unit. I am there to protect my staff and patients. And if you're not willing to put yourself out there, not in an unsafe way, but really get your hands dirty and take on some of that burden sometimes, then you're not going to be respected. You're not going to be successful. So I would say educate yourself on trauma-informed care. Truly take classes, listen to my talks, whatever you need to do. Just Culture. Just Culture is simple. It's a very simple algorithm. I mean, I could do a 1 hour, 5 hour class on it. But the basic principles of Just Culture is when you have an incident happen, like a med error, a patient complaint where they say, staff nurse was rude to them or a tech was rude to them, there's always an investigation that has to happen, right? And in old times, you'd bring a staff member in and you'd say, Sally, so-and-so in room 10 told me that you were rough with them doing a bed turn last night. What happened? Actually, you know what? In old times, they wouldn't even ask what happened. The patient told me you pushed them too hard in the middle of the night when doing a turn. You're going into a level 1. Don't let it happen again. Don't even ask the staff member on what's their side of the story. There was no how did this happen? Anything like that. And that you get huge turnover with that. You lose staff. People don't trust you. People make mistakes, right? So the whole principle of Just Culture is human error. Everyone is human. Everyone makes mistakes. It's whether it's repetitive or not, or whether you learn from your mistakes. So if you, were a little rough with a patient doing a bed turn, but you didn't mean to do it and you didn't realize that you were, turning them too much, and we talk about it and you're devastated, you're oh my God, I never meant to do that. I was never meant to be that way. That should be the end of it, right? If that's the first time, you apologize, you acknowledge it, and it never happens, you're getting a coaching from me. You're not getting a level 1 or anything like that. You're just going to get a coaching. We're going to have a conversation. I'm probably, as a good manager, going to write it down in the file so that I just remember, because I think at one time I had I don't even know, 80 something staff. In reality, you can't remember every conversation. You have to write everything down. So, keeping that log of how are people doing? How are they progressing? And then when you have really tragic things happening, you still have to use Just Culture. Even if there's a death on your unit and it's suspected that an error occurred, you still have to bring the Just Culture piece into it and ask the staff member, what happened? What led you to, make this mistake? Was there a policy in place that you didn't follow, or was there no policy and you didn't even know what to do? Was this egregious? So it's an algorithm that literally is so easy to use, and it brings you to the end where you either, it suggests, this person needs severe, some heavy discipline, like a final warning or a termination, which is very rare. That should be very rare. Or it's a coaching or a level 1 or something like that. So I incorporated that on my units after being trained in it. And then I helped train the hospital as well and all the leaders. And it just really, you need to run your units this way. No one is going to work for a manager that is punitive and that only brings out their mistakes on a daily basis and only micromanages and brings out the wrong. Yeah. So, always giving accolades and thank yous and, things like that. So I could go on about some tidbits that I have of what you could do on your unit to make sure it's like more zen-like and comfortable, and everyone is more, it's peer-driven, it's empowerment, it's trust, all that stuff. But it would take a long time. So I don't want to, but I would say just culture and trauma-informed care. If you can be good at that in the beginning of your career, you're going to be 10 years ahead of me than I was when I started, because I didn't know anything about any of that stuff. Lead with heart, and then go with that stuff, and you really can't go wrong.
Honestly, just listening to you, I probably could have designed 5 different workshops throughout this podcast for each one of those concepts and helping people out and how to be a good leader, how to be a good manager, and how to be a good employee.
Yeah.
We are also a health tech heroes group, so a little bit on the technology as we go
Absolutely.
into the next step. What is going to happen is there's going to be a lot of technology that is inevitable.
Mhm.
As a result of that, the second step may or may not happen. The staff members will have more time with patients, or the technology will take on so much that
Yeah.
there'll be no personal connection with the patients. As a final question, what is your advice for the leaders who are thinking about implementing technology in such a sensitive
Great.
environment?
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question, because I think there is a lot of fear. I'm seeing it on LinkedIn and everywhere, from nurses, and it's understandable, because I just think there's a lot of healthcare staff that are feeling fearful that AI and things like that will take over the nursing role or the tech role or things like that. I personally would never be a part of any sort of design or product or anything that took away the person from the bedside. What I aim to do when I focus on technology and AI, and what I loved about using Observe Smart at my last job and then being in this role now, is that it doesn't take away the staff member from the bedside. It gives them back time in their shift to be more at the bedside. We should not be looking at creating technology that literally replaces a nurse. Like, if I see a robot come into my room as a caretaker and is doing my wound care when I'm an elderly woman, I will be leaving in 2 seconds. I want an actual human being to be caring for me. Okay, you can have AI, you can have robots, you can have all that stuff that they could probably even be more book smart than I am, but are they going to have a heart? No, they don't have a heart, right? So I would never be an advocate for any sort of technology that replace staff. It really should only be there to enhance the patient experience and enhance safety and give the staff back time in their shift. So it should be streamlined, and it should be integrated with the EHR systems so that you're not double documenting, things like that. So whatever technology it is, it should be HIPAA compliant. I am a huge advocate for non-camera technology. There are products out there that do that, and I just am not an advocate for that, because you're going to have a patient that's going to say, what is that? What's watching me? It's going to escalate them more. They're going to feel violated. So there is a way to maintain and increase safety without using cameras and things like that. It's coming, it's here, technology is advancing, but you as leaders have to be smart about making sure that you maintain your integrity and your values of the hospital's mission or the organization's mission of patient care, which should always be nurse to patient, tech to patient, doctor to patient, secretary to patient. I don't want a robot replacing a human. So that's my personal opinion on tech and all that, and whatnot. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it was extremely important, the thought process that you just shared. And again, to reiterate, technology is important, it is inevitable with
Yeah.
technologies.
Yeah.
give the staff members more time
Yeah. And I know that it's
besides the
not
bed.
that staffing crises are out there and low, having, low staff numbers and high patient ratios is a true issue. But if the product and the technology does what it says it does, you won't need as much staff because it's giving back time to the nurse to be able to do her job. So if you give a nurse a 5-patient assignment, that may be overwhelming if they don't have the right tools. But if you give them the right tools to give them time back and more resources, then they're going to feel less anxious, less overwhelmed, have more time for a break. They can actually eat lunch. They can go to the bathroom. I mean, all these simple human things that are needed by a human being that we don't get on our shifts because we're overwhelmed and overworked. So, yeah.
Wonderful. And with that, Susie, thank you very much for being here at the Health Tech Heroes.
Thank
It
you
was
so
an
much for having
emotional
me.
ride.
Pleasure and an honor.
And
Yeah.
I appreciate your time.
Okay, great. Thank you.